Post-media journalist Dan Fumano has just wrapped an investigation into a Vancouver realtor who has apparently disappeared. Dan, what can you tell us about Howard Chong?
So Howard Chong, as you say, was licensed as a realtor. Like according to the Real Estate Council of BC, he was licensed as a realtor between 2012 and 2013. But to call him a realtor, maybe he was licensed as a realtor, but apparently, according to the managing broker at the Vancouver brokerage where he was licensed, he never actually sold any real estate. He never completed any transactions. He was never involved in any actual trading, although he also didn't apparently have any other legitimate source of income during that time. And according to sort of what we read in some of these court documents that we uncovered, apparently he kind of presented him a lot of different faces to a lot of the different people he dealt with. He presented himself sometimes as a realtor, and like as we say, he was licensed and working out of an East Van brokerage. He's presented himself sometimes as a Chinese pop musician, and sometimes as an investment dealer representing a prestigious Hong Kong investment service.
Sure. So there's no crime in being a Chinese pop star.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
So what's he accused of?
So what he's accused of is 10 counts of fraud and theft over $5,000, and they're all related to alleged incidents alleged to have occurred in and around Richmond between 2013 and 2015. So these charges were sworn in sort of mid-2017.
Okay. Now, more than 10, you said. Is that the limit of his actions, or did he make some, is he accused of some high-level type scams?
Well, yeah, in the charge information, it doesn't give you precise dollar amounts. For example, as you say, it just says if it's over $5,000. But according, at least one of the victims who we spoke with and interviewed for this story said that he lost $300,000 in what was purportedly a bogus investment scam opportunity, allegedly. That was through his dealings with Howard Chong, and so we don't know exactly about the other people, but according to the private investigator who looked at this, he had heard that other people may have also lost dollar figures in the six figures.
Can you talk a little bit more about that private investigator?
Yeah.
What did he discover?
He was basically hired. One of the victims went to the police when he first realized that he apparently had been ripped off. He went to the police, but then he also went to a private investigator. He made a report to the police, and they started investigating. But he also went to a private investigator in the hopes that the investigator might be able to help him track down Chong, or maybe locate some of his assets, if he had some kind of assets, real estate, car, whatever, in Canada, that he might be able to try to get some or all of his money back. So the investigator did a fairly comprehensive investigation where he spoke with several of the alleged victims who were eventually named in the charges once they were approved. And yeah, there's a licensed private investigator based in West Vancouver, and he's a former RCMP member himself. But he's not sure exactly where Chong is today.
Do you have an idea as to what type of, if there's a particular type of fraud that Mr. Chong is allegedly perpetrated on his victims?
Again, the details, it doesn't go into detail in the court documents, but what we heard from two of the alleged victims to whom we spoke, they described it as like an investment fraud type thing, where Howard Chong was, in one case, he was purporting to represent this prestigious Hong Kong-based investment fund, saying he had sort of non-registered securities that he was. In the other case, he was holding himself out as having some kind of real estate investment opportunity here in BC, but it presumably didn't exist. But one thing that all the victims had in common is they were all apparently members of the same sort of ethnic, linguistic community. All the victims had Chinese names. Chong apparently was Taiwanese, and so that's something that's actually fairly common. It's called affinity fraud, where you have a fraudster or an alleged fraudster who preys on members of their own either ethnic or religious community. You see it in all kinds of different communities, and it's where they sort of take advantage of a level of trust between people that maybe they go to the same church or synagogue, or maybe they're part of the same ethnic community, and they speak the same language, and so there's kind of a level of trust there, and then sometimes people take advantage of this. So this is something the RCMP, the Canadian Securities Administrators, the BC Securities Commission, they warn about this, to be careful. Another thing that Chong is alleged to have done is that the victim who we spoke at length with, who said he lost $300,000, he was introduced to Chong by a mutual friend. They used to work together in an accounting firm in Richmond. This guy's an accountant, and he said he thought he could trust him because Howard knew his friend. And then, unfortunately, his friend, who we weren't actually able to get a hold of, we tried to track her down, but we couldn't talk to her. But she's listed in the charges. So she was apparently also an alleged victim. She thought she was introducing one friend to another, maybe helping him out, and then she got taken as well. And not only that, but allegedly had brought her friend into it. So that's apparently investigators told us that's also not uncommon, where fraudsters will use a social network to, it just gets a level of trust. Whereas if you're just grabbing someone off the street saying, hey, invest in this with me, it might be harder. But if you already have a friend in common, they can use that to their advantage.
So what's the status of Mr. Chong's case now?
Well, as we say, the charges were laid in the middle of 2017. It's never been reported on before. The story was never in the public. The RCMP didn't put out any announcements or anything that they were looking for him, but they are. At the same time that the charges were sworn, the RCMP officer applied for a Canada-wide warrant for Chong's arrest, basically saying that they believed it was necessary and in the public interest to get a warrant issued. They wouldn't go into the reasons why they believed it was necessary to get that warrant right away, but presumably it seemed like he may have already been in the wind at that point. So the charges remain. He's never stood trial for them or anything, and the RCMP don't know where he is. The private investigator doesn't know where he is. None of the victims apparently know where he is. Alleged victims, I should say. But that's kind of where it is. It's these charges were approved by Crown and sworn and laid, but no one knows where the guy is. So the warrant is still outstanding, and he's still a fugitive.
Okay, Dan, thanks.
Thanks, Darm.